Ky emision mundësohet nga Petrol Company.
Black Friday në Petrol Company. Shkarko dhe regjistrohu në aplikacionin më të ri e bëhu klient VIP, duke përfituar deri në 8.5 cent zbritje. Zbritja vlen nga data 9 deri me 16 tetor. Shkarko aplikacionin në App apo Play Store. Jeto më lirë vetëm me Petrol Company.
Përshëndetje të nderuar shikues, jemi bashkë në këtë pjesë e emisionit Prime Time për të folur me një mysafir të veçantë sa i përket zgjedhjeve në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe raporteve ndërmjet SBA-s dhe Kosovës me kongresistin amerikan dhe mikun e madh të shqiptarëve, DioGuardi. Greetings from Pristina, Mr. DioGuardi.
Hey Jamal, thank you for taking the time to call me. These are trying times for everybody, I know. But I appreciate your call and your time.
Thank you for your time, sir. I'm going to start by asking you about your feelings just a few hours before this crucial elections in US.
Well, it's going to be very hard to predict because it looks like this race is going to be tightening as I see the press here. But, you know, no matter what the outcome is, Albanians should be confident that we will still have friends in Washington, whether Joe Biden wins or whether Donald Trump wins. You know, it's always been the philosophy of the Albanian American Civic League to work with both Democrats and Republicans. So we don't come about this from ideology or from parties, but the fact that we are a bipartisan lobby, and you know, Shirley is a registered Dem, I am a registered Republican, but recently, I came out as a registered Republican for Joe Biden. And I did that publicly because I felt that it was important to understand, especially for the Albanian people, to understand that we have a big history with Joe Biden, starting from when I was a congressman back in the 1980s. We had several important hearings, congressional hearings, when he was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And he's taken trips to Kosovo. And he's done a lot of good work. So I believe we have to hope that he becomes the president because then we will have more advantages, I believe.
The Albanian community is divided there, to say the least. I mean, for many years, obviously, you have Albanians voting for Republicans and you have other Albanians voting for Democrats. But at this election, how important it is, you know, maybe to have a common stance of Albanians, as you say, to vote for Biden, because you think that he's done much more for Kosovo?
Well, there's no question in my mind, because I have a good feel for the Albanian community, and I'm reading the press, that most of the Albanians, in my mind, will be voting for Joe Biden, because they know him. They know what he has done before he became vice president. And even now, he's had a very good, strong campaign. And I've been watching the ads on TV. He's giving the right message. And, you know, the big issue in America today is the virus, as it probably is all over Europe. But we have a big issue here as well. And he is the one that is saying the right things because he's tied into science. And he's not just giving his personal opinions on what the virus means to us. He's using all the right protocols, as I am with Shirley. You know, I just turned 80, so I have to wear that mask. I don't want to see anything happen to me before I finish all my work for the Albanian people, and it's not finished yet.
As you said, you played a role, right, in, let's say, introducing Mr. Biden to Albanians right in the 80s about the plight of Albanians, especially in Kosovo.
Yeah, you know, we gave our second Balkan Peace Award was given in Washington to Senator Biden. And why did we, and that was, I think, the year was 2002. And that was just after we invited him to the Sheraton Hotel in 2002, April 28th. We celebrated the 12th anniversary of the Albanian American Civic League. In fact, it was 12 years since we brought Rogova and 12 other Albanians from Kosovo here to make the case. We had the big hearing, as you know, with Congressman Lantos, who was chairman of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, and so many others came to give testimony for the Albanians. It cannot be forgotten. But he did something very important because I asked him to have a hearing for the Albanians in Kosovo, especially for the whole issue of the Balkans. and that was in 1998. That was tough times for Kosovo. Don't forget, it was the summer offensive, and it was in 1999 that we finally got, the American State Department to see that they had to do something with Milosevic, and that was to drop the bombs on Serbia. But we've had good attention from Senator Biden from the beginning, and I believe that he knows us well as people. He certainly knows me and Shirley personally, and I look forward to him now being the president so we can work not only with the executive branch, but continue to work with Congress. As you know, the power for the Albanian people came from my relationship starting when I was a congressman in 1985, and it continued afterwards when we formed the Albanian American Civic League to make sure that we kept all those friends, Democrats and Republicans, on the side of the Albanian people so we can build a case for the independence of Kosovo, which finally came in 2008.
There were some accusations that Mr. Trump and this administration has been treating equally Kosovo and Serbia, let's say, and sometimes actually this administration has been tough on Kosovo, especially with the tax and other conditions. Do you think that Mr. Biden will change the course, knowing what happened here, like during the war and independence, and can be maybe tougher with Serbia?
No, I would think that Mr. Biden is going to be on our side because we have educated him very well. In fact, you could see some of the tapes on YouTube where we brought him to New York in 1991 before he spoke at that 12th anniversary where I brought in representatives from all the Albanian areas. And it's clear that he said in that beautiful meeting we had in my Italian-American club in New York, he turned to me and says, Joe, when you came, you gave me an education. I had started to change my mind about Milosevic, but you changed my heart. So I don't think he's ever forgotten that. And it's very important that we had that personal connection with Biden as when he was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Have you heard what President Trump is saying about Kosovo and Serbia? He just said that he ended a 400 years war and people were Kosovo and Serbia were killing each other massively. Did you hear that? What was your thought?
Yeah, but he exaggerates on everything. And if you live in America, you kind of get used to that. There is no validity to many of his statements on that. But there is no question in my mind that with Biden, we're going to have a much more opportunity to gain out of the relationship with the United States. Because you've had Trump leaning towards Putin and Vučić and Erdogan and even Rama, who has not taken a strong position for us when he has to. And it's important, I think, to have Biden because he is not saying out loud that he is friends with Putin. And if if you're a friend with Putin, you're going to start getting the information that is wrong from Putin about Serbia, because obviously they are, what do you want to say about those Slavs? They're almost first cousins. They all came out of the Ukraine in the 7th century. And I don't think Trump has been educated properly about that. We've tried, believe it or not, but he has his own ideas. He doesn't read from a script. Things happen out of his mind, the top of his head from time to time, and many times he's not saying the right things, and it's scary for the Albanian people. But there's no question in my mind that we can trust Joe Biden when it comes to any relationships with the United States for the Balkans, especially for Kosovo.
And we've seen Mr. Granel, his special envoy for the Kosovo-Serbia talks, which is very active with the Albanian community. I think he was just in Michigan, in Detroit, having some rallies with Albanians and calling them to vote for Trump for what this administration did for Kosovo.
Well, this is America, and we don't have one ideology, one philosophy, and Albanians don't either. But it's disappointing for me to see Albanians from any place to say that we should be voting for Trump when he has clearly not given us what we need and is forcing, I think, more compromise with the Serbs, especially with Vučić. We worked very hard for the freedom and independence for Kosovo, and we cannot compromise anything more with the Slavs and certainly with the Serbs on that issue. So I have to say that because it's important that we stand tough, and if we should be looking for anything, it has to be no compromise, especially when it comes to the recognition of Kosovo by Serbia and taking out of the constitution of Serbia that Kosovo is still, part of Serbia. This is ridiculous. We've worked too hard. I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's really, ironical that I have to say this now 30 years later, when we thought we made the case when Milosevic went to The Hague and paid the price for what he did against all the people of the Balkans, especially the Bosnians and then the people of Kosovo.
What's your thought on the Washington agreement? Mr. Trump invited both leaders of Kosovo and Serbia, and there is an agreement which is called for the economic normalization of relations. And there were some critiques here about what Kosovo actually gained, because Prime Minister Hoti supposedly went there to get the recognition, which he never did.
Well, I don't think we gained anything on that. I saw it. I was hoping that we'd have some kind of an agreement that would work. But, when it comes to agreements, there's always some compromise. But the key thing you have to look for is implementation. And now we have to see if any of these things that were discussed in that White House meeting with Vučić and Trump will be implemented. But I don't see it. He should have recognized Kosovo, its independence, and recognized it as a state. Don't forget, one of the goals of Serbia has been to get into the European Union. I mean, I don't know how much of a goal it is today with all of the help that Vučić is getting from Putin, but let's say that it's important for them. The reason why people will be allowed into the European Union is if they are good neighbors to their neighboring countries. And Vučić hasn't shown that. He's not a good neighbor. He's still speaking like, Serbia controls Kosovo. And that's not a good neighbor. But let's see if these economic agreements are put into place. Maybe we need to look step by step. Gor, bahat mor. That's what my father told me as an Albanian. We build a wall little by little, and we build, castles little by little. The point is, let's see what happens now from that. But right now, all I saw was a photo option or opportunity so that Trump could get as many votes as he could in those states where there are Albanians. And right now in states like Michigan and states like Illinois and Wisconsin, there are Albanians, and those states are very important if Trump thinks he's going to win the way he won in 2016. I don't see it. I see the energy now on the side of the Albanian people voting for Joe Biden.
Should the new President Biden, if he's elected, implement the agreement which was reached by President Trump?
Which agreement is that?
This one that we're talking about, the Kosovo-Serbia deal.
Well, all right, but we have to see. The best thing that came out of that was that Israel finally recognized what Kosovo is and what the Albanians did for the Jewish people. And this is something I started when I made that trip to visit Ramiz Aliyah in May of 1990 with Congressman Lantos, who was a Jewish American Democrat. And we succeeded very much in that meeting, because then we found out for the first time that there were so many Jews that were saved by Albanians from Albania and Kosovo. And we're continuing to tell that story because it's important for the world to know who the Albanian people are. They're a very tolerant people. When the Pope went to Albania, he said, and this was in the New York Times, "I can't believe I met this bubble of tolerance in Albania, where Albanians of one religion even marry Albanians from another religion." So we have to promote this good reputation in the world, and that's what Shirley and I are doing with respect to the story, and what we're trying to do now to do a public relations campaign to all the world, so that not only Jews in America know about it, but Jews all over the world, because we have to look for their support in the future. Why? I was smart enough in 1980s when I was a congressman to find out we had 34 Jewish American congressmen, okay? And I made sure they knew how good the Albanian people were, and they became strong friends of the Albanian lobby. We are still the only registered lobby in Washington for the Albanian people, and that's for all the Albanian people. And you can be sure that our job is not yet finished.
On that note, is the Serbian lobby gaining some new ground?
Well, you know, Serbia has been using every trick in the book. They're using money. Lord knows where they get all this money because it's a bankrupt country, and they're spending it in Washington on expensive lobbyists. We don't have support from a country. In fact, it's illegal for a independent lobby like the Albanian American Civic League to get funds from countries. Then that makes them what you call foreign agents, and I will never register as a foreign agent. I want to make sure that I continue my work, and Shirley believes the same way, but I'm an Albanian American, and I admitted that. Don't forget, when we had that big hearing in 1990 when the Serbian American Congresswoman, Helen Bentley, came after me to say, you know, I should be accurate when I speak, and you're a lobbyist. I said, listen, I'm an ethnic Albanian. I'm the president of the Albanian American Civic League. That was 30 years ago, and that's what I still believe today. So Vučić can take all the money he wants from Erdogan, all the money he wants from Putin, and wherever else he's getting it, but he's never going to be able to compete with Joe DioGuardi, Shirley Cloys, and the Albanian American Civic League, because we are honest, hardworking, we don't get paid, we're doing this from our heart, and we have to continue to do it until one day we get maximum respect for the Albanian nation. Kamtar. I say we need a Kamtar Ire, a new Albanian nation without changing the borders.
Okay.
Because Albanians have a great reputation, but they have to act like a nation. They speak the same language. They all live on their ancestral lands in between these borders that they changed after World War I, and they have the same traditions. So why not act as a nation, show the world who we are, and not let Albanian politicians in Macedonia and Montenegro and Albania and Kosovo and anywhere, Prisheva, to try to divide us. When they try to divide us, then we don't have the maximum power we need.
I'm going to ask you about the state of the Albanian nation by the end, but first I want to know your opinion about the political situation in Kosovo, as you say. I want your opinion about the Kurti government. I know if you know him, like he led the government for like just 2 months and then was overthrown, obviously democratically, by a vote in the assembly. But then he accused Mr. Granel and the US as being behind a coup to overthrow him. What do you know about him, about his governance and the way he left?
Well, I know Kurti from back after the war. I went to Kosovo and we even had breakfast together. And don't forget, he suffered a lot. He was in the jails in Serbia, I believe. And so he has his attitude formed by those experiences. But I saw that he started a good government with Vjosa Osmani. And now we have, thank God, Fatah Bezlimi also in the parliament. And I think these are people who are educated, who are smart, and who are really good Albanians from the mind and the heart. And we have to hope that we have a new government soon in Kosovo, because right now I don't think this government is functioning as good as it can be, and I don't think it has the complete support of the Albanian people.
So you would like to see Mr. Kurti again in the government?
Well, I cannot say Mr. Kurti, but I can tell you that we need to have new people, and who's better than people like our good friend Fatah Bezlimi, not to run right now, to run the country, but this is what we need. We need Albanians to get educated like he did at Harvard. He's now got his doctorate. He's in the parliament. He understands America. He understands the history of the Albanian people. We need to get more Albanians educated in America and to convince them to go back and help to change the democracy in Kosovo, because it's not really acting as a full democratic state. We still have the parties having too much control over the economic resources and giving jobs to the people. We want real jobs there. We want a real economy, and that's going to have to come. That's not there yet.
Well, now you have this government which is led by Mr. Houthi from the Democratic League of Kosovo, who was elected and now is in the governing with Mr. Haradinaj. But the political landscape can change because of the work of the specialist court, as you are aware. There might be indictments against President Thaçi and PDK leader Mr. Veselje very soon.
Well, justice has to prevail, and that's not for me to judge, okay? There's no question that these are lingering things that have to be handled, and I hope that's going to be taken out of the way. You know, we worked very hard at one time to get Mr. Limaj and Mr. Haradinaj away from The Hague. Why do we do that? It's not because we were looking to help them as individuals. We didn't want Kosovo to be looked at as a terrorist state, and it would have been terrible if The Hague had, you know, convicted someone like Ramush Haradinaj or anyone else. So this is another problem we have, because it doesn't look good for Kosovo when any Albanians are being brought to The Hague. But we cannot interfere with international justice. That's up to independent judges to take care of.
Otherwise, in our last interview, I know that you weren't very much happy on how Mr. Thaçi led politically Kosovo for many years.
Well, Mr. Thaçi really has never been a supporter of what I have done. He was supporting his party, raising money for his party, and he was then making the party strong instead of the nation. That's not the way I see Kosovo. To me, we have to start dealing with making Kosovo strong. And I think we need to change, and I've said this before in one of your interviews, we got to change the way elections happen. People should be voting for people, not for lists on a party. Now, that may sound strange to some Albanians, but that is not true democracy. True democracy is when you are voting for your representatives in Congress, like we do here, and not just a party list that's put together and then you don't know really whether or not they're supporting the nation the way they should. I think money has played too much of a role in Kosovo, and I think the parties have started that, and it's still not finished. And while it's important, I think, to have good, strong parties, it's not important for the parties to control the economics, to give out the jobs, because then you don't have the right approach to democracy. There should be support for the state, and that means that we should have an economy that is supported by all the people and all the parties, and hopefully people will apply for jobs that they deserve.
And that's why people are leaving Kosovo, the young people who don't see their future here.
Well, we know that, and that's really one of the big problems. We still don't have the ability to travel, throughout Western Europe the way other countries do, and we need more of the leaders in Kosovo to be lobbying for that, and we are going to lobby for that. Shirley and I will go to Washington as soon as we can. We already, before we took that trip to Switzerland last November, we went to Washington just to meet with the members of Congress on the right committees, and I was so happy to see how much they still supported the Albanian people. So we have a lot of love and support for the Albanian people in Congress. And don't forget, most of what I did was done through the Congress of the United States of America, the Senate and the House. It wasn't done through the presidency. And why is that important? Well, that's where the money comes from. No budget in America can be accomplished by any president unless they make the case to the Appropriations Committee of the Congress. And we have many friends now in all these committees, and we have to, as soon as this virus is over with, you'll see me traveling a lot more to Washington to make sure that we reestablish the real love that Congress has had for the Albanian people. That's where we got our power. That's where we got our, independence. In fact, it's amazing to me that we worked so hard with Clinton, but it took a Republican, George W. Bush, when I delivered a million Neskrimi signatures from Kosovo with the help of Fatah Bislimi and other young Albanians. And then finally, Bush recognized, I guess he was the first one to recognize the independence of Kosovo. Now we need Vučić to show that he's a good friend and a good neighbor to the Albanian people of Kosovo by recognizing that. And there cannot be any compromise on that. Albanians have paid too much blood, too much time, too much money for their freedom and their independence, especially in Kosovo, and there should be no doubt about that. And there should be no doubt that not one piece of Kosovo can be divided. If we start dividing one piece, that's going to now allow for other things to happen. We have to stand our ground. We have Kosovo. It has its borders. No changes to that. And let's get Serbia to wake up. If they want peace and stability in the region, and they want to be considered a friend so they get into the European Union, they must recognize Kosovo as an independent state. And they must take the word Kosovo out of the Serbian constitution.
And the overall state of the Albanian nation, what's happening in Albania and in northern Macedonia, how do you see it? Where are Albanians right now?
Well, it's complicated. And if I could have a show just on that issue, and you could see the problems now with Greece and Turkey again, with the maritime border. Albania is involved in that. So there's a lot of instability coming. And I'm hoping that we can continue to work for the human rights and the economic strength for the Albanians in Macedonia, in Montenegro, in Preševa, because we need to make sure that we don't forget them either. We have at least 1 million Albanians between Montenegro and Macedonia. I think Macedonia alone has probably 900,000. And, you know, we can't forget them because they were divided unfairly from the Albanian nation after World War I. And that was done deliberately by the adversaries of the Albanian people, the Greeks and the Serbs, to keep them weak. And if Woodrow Wilson, an American president, did not intervene, and he knew the Albanians were not Slavs, but he had a compromise, so he put half the Albanian people in a country called Albania. Otherwise, all the Albanians would have been in that phony, failed country called Yugoslavia. And we had to deal with that. I dealt with that for 5 years in Congress. One of the key things I had to do in chasing Milosevic was to make sure we ended Yugoslavia, and we did. Why? Because Yugoslavia was so repressive to all the Albanian people. Many people in America don't remember all these 8 republics and provinces and how many Albanians were in Montenegro and Macedonia and in other republics. So that I had to go after Yugoslavia. And if I accomplished anything, it's the fact that we put Milosevic in The Hague and then Yugoslavia disappeared. But we didn't get the independence for Kosovo as fast as we wanted, but it finally came. Nothing comes easy to the Albanian people. But Shirley and I will continue to work very hard to make sure that we not only have the old friends we had in Congress, but even newer ones. So the job is not finished.
You mentioned Prime Minister Rama earlier. How do you evaluate his work for Albania and Albanians?
I don't like when he's too close to Erdogan. He's been spending too much time with Vučić, and I don't see him standing up enough for the Albanians in Kosovo. He should remember what our league did for Albania, okay? In 1990, I went there to visit Ramiz Alia, okay? And then I went back twice, in 1991, 1992, in order to be sure that we got rid of communism, and I had to support, obviously, President Berisha, because he was running as the Democratic Party of Albania. But I found out later that he had too many communist friends, and today he's very happy and very rich on his positions, and I'm not sure he remembers what we did for him to get elected. And he didn't support our league enough. So I just have to say that because I have to judge each one of these governments individually by what they are doing to support the best voice the Albanian people ever had. And that's Joe DioGuardi, an ethnic Albanian in Washington with his wife and partner, Shirley Cloys. And we are doing the best we can. And we do it without raising a lot of money. We do it with hard work, with being clever. Don't forget how Skanderbeg won. He won because he was clever. When everybody thought he was in the castle, when 200,000 soldiers were coming, he was miles down. Why? He knew a big army had to have food, had to have weapons, and he was already throwing them off the hill to weaken the Sultan. Well, we got to do the same thing. We got to learn from that. We got to be clever. And that's what we do when we go to Congress. We are clever about how we relate to the people there and how we deliver our message. It's not just money. It's the way you deliver a message and the way you're trusted. And we have a lot of trust in the Congress today, and that trust will continue. You can be sure.
One of the topics which probably were discussed in Washington in the meeting with President Trump was maybe in the future to have some sort of visa liberalization for US, for Kosovo citizens. I don't know if you read that. Do you think something like that can ever happen, that Kosovo citizens could get to US without a visa?
Well, I think, the first thing to resolve the whole issue of Kosovo is to make Kosovo a member of NATO. That's what listen, who worked hard to get NATO status for Albania? I did. In fact, look at my interview with, what was he then, President or Prime Minister Berisha. He said to me, Joe, we need your help. This is 1993. Please try to get us into NATO. And I shifted the lobbying to that. But we need that for Kosovo today. Once Kosovo is in NATO, then it has the protection of all the NATO members. So I would rather work on that before we did anything with the UN. Because the UN is confused with the Ahtisaari plan, with Resolution 1244, and obviously we want to get as many states as possible to recognize Kosovo at the UN. But I would spend my time now on hopefully getting Kosovo as a member of NATO, because then we'll be fully protected. Don't forget, we're the ones that brought the U.S. troops to Kosovo. We're the ones that made sure that Erdogan did not take Bonstil. When I heard that he was trying to do that, I ran to Washington right away, and I met with the chairman of the U.S. Armed Services Committee, and we changed that so that Bonstil was controlled by American troops. We need American troops there somehow, not,
Plan to take Bonstil?
There was. Erdogan wanted it. And I forget who was saying it at that time, that maybe we have too many troops around the world and we have to take some troops out of Kosovo, and maybe we should turn Bonstil over to Erdogan. This, if you don't remember this was within the last 10 years.
Okay, so my last question.
Maybe it wasn't publicized, and maybe I got the message, and I made sure it didn't happen.
Okay, my last question is actually, are you planning to visit Kosovo anytime soon? Maybe after the pandemic?
Well, when you turn 80 and you have this virus now all over the world, and it's certainly in Europe, you can see how it's spiking. I'm more comfortable right here in Westchester County, and I got to be careful about that. But I can't wait for the vaccine to come so that we know this will be handled the way we handled polio and other major viruses that we've had in the past. And I'm sure it's going to come. Trump tried to say it's here or it's coming soon. No, it's not going to come so soon because they have to be tested. We can't now get a virus that turns out to have other side effects. So I believe once that happens, you will see me back in Kosovo, because we got a lot to do for Kosovo. And I know the Albanian people would like to see me back there. And Shirley and I have a couple of surprises we've been working on. In fact, one of them would have happened this year with the Jewish people and big representatives from Israel, but it didn't happen because of the virus. It's difficult to get people to take planes. So now we're hoping next year is going to be our year for Kosovo after 30 years to make some big moves for Kosovo, hopefully with the cooperation of all the Albanian people and all the politicians there. Kosovo still needs the United States of America. But thank God the United States will always remain a friend of Kosovo.
And we're very much grateful for that. I want to thank you very much for taking the time, Mr. DioGuardi, to talk with Channel 10.
My pleasure. And thank you again for the good work you're doing, Jamal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Kemi folur direkt nga Shëbat me Gjo DioGuardi.